They called themselves the Vari Dominion, conquerors of over 1,000 systems, rulers of 4 galaxies, and proud of the fact they'd never lost a single battle. They didn't just win wars, they ended civilizations. Not through diplomacy, not through peace, through submission. Their fleets arrived, and most races surrendered before the first blast. Those who didn't? Their planets became dust in hours. The Vari didn't negotiate, they dominated. So when Earth showed up on their radar, a blue rock circling a yellow star in the outskirts of a neglected spiral arm, they thought it'd be the same as every other conquest. Their high command didn't even consider sending their primary forces. Just a single strike fleet, a standard one, with enough firepower to flatten continents, commanded by a mid-tier warlord. To the Vari, humanity wasn't a threat. Just another species too primitive to matter. Their language was still messy, emotions still ruled their minds, and their tech, at least from a distance, looked quaint. But they made one critical mistake. They judged humans by what they saw, not by what they didn't understand. The Vari fleet arrived near Saturn. Silent, efficient. Their lead commander, Krathtor, broadcast a universal message: surrender and be absorbed into the Dominion. No reply came from Earth. He laughed. Most species panicked by now. Some begged, some tried to bribe. Humans sent silence. The Vari began their advance. They crossed into Mars' orbit. Still no response, until something happened. Saturn blinked. Literally, the rings vanished. In a second, like they'd been sucked into a vacuum. Then a signal came, not through translation protocols, not polite, not encoded in galactic diplomacy standards. It was raw, brutal. One sentence. "You took too long to get here." That was all. Then the entire Vari fleet near Mars disappeared. No weapons fired, no defense systems triggered. They were just gone. Hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers. Nothing left. Krathtor, watching from the command bridge of his carrier, froze. Not out of fear, out of confusion. That wasn't possible. No species had ever done that. Not even the old empires who once rivaled the Dominion. He ordered scans, nothing. He ordered backup fleets to jump in. 2 more fleets entered Sol space. They didn't last 10 minutes. The first was destroyed by what the Vari couldn't even comprehend. Ships moving faster than light inside a gravity well, which broke every rule of physics they knew. The second fleet tried to flee. Only one ship made it back, its crew screaming about shadows tearing apart space. That was the first day. The Dominion's high command called it a tactical anomaly, just a fluke. Maybe a hidden empire had been hiding near Earth. Maybe the humans were puppets. But then came the real blow. A human fleet appeared. Not near Earth. Not in the Milky Way, but in Vari territory. 300 capital ships. Sleek. Black. Silent. No transmissions. Just action. They descended on the mining colony of Goran 5, a system the Vari had controlled for nearly 300 years. The colony was fortified. 3 planetary shields, orbital cannons, tens of thousands of troops. The human fleet leveled it in 13 minutes. The Vari didn't just lose ships. They lost the idea that they were untouchable. What terrified them most wasn't the human firepower. It was how they fought. There were no negotiations, no declarations of war, no political messages. Just cold, calculated vengeance. Humanity didn't want peace. They didn't want territory. They didn't want to join the galactic community. They wanted blood. And they had been preparing for this moment, quietly, for years. Back on Earth, deep beneath the oceans, in black bunkers miles below the surface, humanity had built its response to a universe they knew would one day come knocking. And they weren't just ready. They were waiting. The Galactic Dominion's high command didn't panic easily. For centuries, they'd known nothing but victory. Even when facing the last holdouts of the Heron Coalition or the warlike Volari clans, they'd come out on top, crushing opposition beneath their vast, disciplined fleets. But this was something different. The humans didn't fit into any of their models. They weren't irrational. They weren't brutes. They were terrifyingly precise. Every strike had intent. Every maneuver was surgical. It wasn't war the way the Vari knew it. It was calculated vengeance delivered by ghosts in machines. After the loss of Goran 5, the Dominion officially labeled Earth a Tier 1 threat species, a designation not used in over 700 years. It wasn't just because humans had advanced ships or exotic weapons. It was how little they spoke, how little they explained. The Vari were used to enemies who raged or pleaded or cursed their names. But these humans said nothing. They struck and left silence in their wake. Even the Dominion's top analysts couldn't decode the pattern. Primitive species, they kept saying. But those words were losing meaning. These weren't primitives. These were predators. And they were angry. In a remote orbital station far from the core worlds, an elite Vari strategist named Tharek Olos studied the data coming in. Unlike most Vari, he had never been obsessed with pride or superiority. He believed in cold logic, and the data terrified him. He pulled up footage from Goran 5 again, what little had survived the destruction. Human ships had appeared from nowhere. Not through warp gates, not even from deep space. They'd torn into real space through artificial singularities, a form of transit the Vari had only theorized. Then came the footage of the attack. The human fleet didn't swarm or overwhelm. They cut. They surgically removed resistance. Their ships didn't look impressive. No golden trim, no ceremonial flags, just sleek black armor, angled to eat radar, with surfaces that shimmered like obsidian in a fire. No warning shots, no transmissions, no mercy. Within minutes, planetary shields had failed, not due to brute force, but through targeted EMP bursts, followed by pinpoint bombardments that destroyed the generator cores. That meant they knew exactly where to strike. They had schematics, blueprints, intel. Tharek stared at the screen. These weren't first strikes. These were retaliations. "Sir," one of his aides said, trembling. "More reports. 3 trade stations on the outer rim. Gone. No survivors." "Were they Vari?" "Some. Most were client species." Tharek closed his eyes. That was worse. Humanity wasn't even differentiating between core Vari and their puppet governments. To them, every outpost that flew the Dominion's banner was a target. "This is not conquest," Tharek said quietly. "This is punishment." Meanwhile, aboard the UNSV Hades, one of Earth's flagship dreadnoughts, Admiral Grant Halver stood silently at the observation deck, watching the aftermath of their latest strike. Below, the once proud Vari station of Vekar 12 now drifted in ruin. Fires raged. No escape pods, no beacons. Total silence. Halver was a man carved from war. Not old by Earth standards, early 40s, but his eyes looked 100 years tired. He didn't wear medals, didn't smile, and rarely spoke more than necessary. Beside him stood Commander Ruiz, younger, mouthier, but just as lethal. He broke the silence. "They'll call us monsters for this." Halver didn't flinch. "Good." Ruiz stared at the wreckage. "We really nuked a hospital wing down there." Halver turned to him, cold eyes sharp as steel. "Did the Vari ask if it was a hospital when they glassed Sydney, or Johannesburg, or when they erased the Martian colonies like they were nothing?" Ruiz didn't answer. Halver stepped closer to the window. "We warned them once, a long time ago. They called us a quaint biological race, remember? Said our tech was obsolete, that our emotions made us weak. He leaned forward, hands clasped behind his back. Let them fear monsters. Because we gave peace, we gave silence, and they came for us anyway. Ruiz swallowed. Orders? Halvor's voice dropped to a growl. Next target, Haltor Shipyard. Burn it. The Haltor Shipyard was a fortress. A massive structure orbiting the gas giant Vunex, it produced a quarter of the Dominion's cruisers and war carriers. Defended by over 200 heavy-class batteries, a garrison fleet of 30 destroyers, and a planetary base, it was considered untouchable until the humans arrived. Not with overwhelming numbers, not with a full assault, just 4 ships. 4 ships against a shipyard the size of a moon. The Vari laughed at first. Then the human lead ship, Spectre, vanished from their sensors mid-flight. No warp signature. No cloaking. Just gone. Seconds later, explosions rocked the internal reactor coils of the shipyard. Controlled blasts. Timed. Perfect. Then Spectre reappeared inside the Vari formation and unleashed a singularity charge that collapsed an entire wing of the garrison fleet into a micro-black hole. The battle lasted 9 minutes. Not one human casualty. Not one survivor from the Vari side. Back on Earth, deep beneath the Black Trident facility, a classified fortress city dug into the crust under Antarctica, a council of humanity's remaining leaders watched the war unfold through massive holoscreens. Most of Earth's governments had collapsed or merged after the first Vari incursion. What remained was united only by a single doctrine. Never again. They had watched the Dominion burn Mars, reduce Luna to a shadow of its former self. Billions had died in those first strikes. And in that fire, humanity forged its purpose. They didn't want galactic territory. They didn't want trade routes. They wanted the Vari to suffer. General Caney, an old war dog with cybernetic limbs and a voice like gravel, turned to the council. We've hit 15 systems. They're unraveling. Their outer colonies are evacuating. A senator, the last one still clinging to diplomacy, asked, should we not offer them terms, a chance to— No. Caney's tone cut like a blade. They offered no terms when they came for us. They killed children in front of cameras. They sterilized oceans. They laughed while doing it. He stared at the room. Now they beg for terms? No one argued. In the Vari capital, the Emperor's halls once shined with gold and light. Now they buzzed with fear. Soldiers lined the walls. Advisors barked conflicting orders. The Emperor, once proud and untouchable, stared at the map of burning systems and whispered one sentence over and over. We should have killed them all. We should have finished Earth. But it was too late. Humanity had become something else now. They weren't fighting to survive. They were fighting because it was deserved. In the void between stars, the UNSV Revenant, a stealth dreadnought, intercepted a distress beacon from a Dominion freighter. It was full of refugees, civilian scientists, engineers, children. Halvor received the intel. Orders? Ruiz asked again. Halvor stared at the transmission, silent. He watched a Vari child on the screen. Big black eyes, crying, clutching her parents' hand. He remembered what they did to Earth's children during the invasion. He turned away from the screen. Delete the beacon. Move on. Ruiz hesitated. Sir, they're unarmed. Halvor's voice was stone. They weren't unarmed when they came for us. Ruiz nodded. Aye. The Revenant vanished into the dark. The beacon went silent. No survivors. War wasn't new to the Vari. But this was something else. Across the stars, Entire systems fell into silence, not because the Dominion ordered retreat, but because humanity made examples, burning examples, ruined stations, ghost planets, blackened ship hulls drifting in frozen space, picked clean of life and stripped of pride. Pride was what the Vari once had too much of. Now, they had none. The capital's skies, once filled with shining banners and ceremonial patrol ships, were now crowded with evacuation vessels, cargo freighters hastily retrofitted to carry families, scientists, engineers, anyone who wasn't vital to the war effort. The inner core, once untouchable, had become a target, no longer protected by arrogance. The Dominion no longer laughed at Earth. They whispered its name like a curse. And deep in the royal chamber, the Emperor himself, Cathal the Eternal Flame, stared at a display wall that played every broadcast the humans had allowed to go public. They hadn't spoken directly yet, but they didn't need to. Every strike was a message. Cathal clenched his teeth as he watched the destruction of Solon Prime for the 6th time. A world of over 4 billion citizens, gone in 13 minutes. No bombardment, no siege, just gone. Humans had used a device that collapsed the planet's core into a singularity. No atmosphere, no crust, no survivors, just a floating black scar where Solon Prime used to be. One of the Emperor's advisors, a jittery hybrid scholar named Vak, spoke hesitantly. "Majesty, we may need to initiate diplomatic channels. Even a temporary ceasefire." Silence. Cathal's voice echoed across the throne hall. "We gave them no mercy, no warning. We burned their colonies while they begged for mercy. We erased cities without blinking." He stepped down from his throne, closer to the advisor. "And now that their knives are in our throats, you want to talk about peace?" Vak swallowed. "It is not peace I suggest, Majesty. It is survival." In the cold of deep space, aboard the UNSV Hades, Admiral Halver sat alone in his quarters, staring at an old photo. A woman and 2 kids, smiling, somewhere green, maybe Montana or what was left of it. The surface had been wiped out during the Vari's first attack. Halver's family was buried in that firestorm. There were no graves, just ash. He lit a cigarette, a rare indulgence these days, and let the smoke curl through the air as he stared at the faces. He didn't speak to them anymore, not out loud. That had stopped after the first year of the war. The grief had changed into something colder, sharper. Revenge wasn't just a goal now. It was the only thing keeping him breathing. A knock came at the door. "Enter," he said, voice flat. Commander Ruiz stepped inside, tablet in hand. "Updates," he said. "Recon Squadron reports movement near Sector 9K. Vari are pulling everything back toward their core systems." Halver nodded. Desperation. They're abandoning their outer systems, even the resource-rich ones. That's a mistake. Ruiz hesitated. "They're bleeding, sir. We've hit 27 colonies in 3 months, even for us. This is fast." Halver turned his gaze to the commander. "Are you hesitating?" Ruiz looked away. "No, it's a lot of blood." Halver stood up, his height casting a long shadow across the steel floor. "They gave us blood first, and now they get to drown in it." He walked to the holomap and gestured to a blinking red system. Tarsus 4, a known Vari communications nexus. "This is Next," Ruiz blinked. "That's a civilian system." "Not anymore," Halver said. "Every comm center, every signal relay, we break them. No more screams, no more cries, just silence." Tarsus 4 was a soft target by Vari standards. No major fleet presence. A few defense satellites. It had always been considered too far from the front lines to matter. But now, the humans made it matter. The fleet arrived in silence, no formation, no protocol. The ships came in like shadows, dispersing in every direction, surrounding the planet in less than 90 seconds. And then the jamming fields went up. Tarsus went dark. No one could send for help. No signals in, no signals out. Only the hum of approaching death. From orbit, the humans didn't carpet bomb. They didn't launch mass drivers. They sent teams, ground units, elite squads in matte black exo armor with pulse rifles and neural dampeners. Silent, efficient, merciless. They moved through Tarsus's cities like whispers in the wind. Every communication tower was rigged with charges. Every control node disabled. Any Vari officer who resisted was killed instantly. Civilians were ignored unless they tried to interfere. By the time the sun rose over Tarsus again, the entire network had been reduced to scrap. One of the local administrators, a high-ranking Vari named Lorvis, tried to resist. He'd broadcast a last-minute message across the local channels, shouting in panic, "To the humans! We are not your enemy! We did not order the invasion of your world. That was high command." He didn't finish the sentence. A human sniper, stationed 5 kilometers away on a tower roof, put a round through his skull. The broadcast ended in a flash of static. Aboard the UNSV Revenant, reports flowed in. Tarsus was down. Clean sweep. Halver reviewed the footage without emotion. Ruiz watched over his shoulder, jaw tight. "They're not all soldiers," he said finally. "That guy, Lorvis, he tried to stop the war, publicly, months ago." Halver looked at him. "You think there were politicians on Earth who tried to stop it too? What happened to them when the Vari came?" Ruiz didn't answer. Halver leaned closer to the display, tapping on the now-dead Lorvis. "We kill their voices. All of them. Everyone. Until they understand. Until there's nothing left to rebuild." Far across the galaxy, in a secret vault known as the Vault of Silence, the Dominion gathered what remained of its ancient black site assets, experimental weapons, forbidden technology, desperate tools once locked away for fear they'd destroy more than they saved. One of those weapons was Project Threnos, an artificial intelligence harvested from a dying star, fused with sentient code, and sealed in a neutron cage for over 200 years. They had feared activating it. Until now. The Dominion's leading technocrats met in the Vault's war chamber. They argued, fought, cried. Then, finally, the vote passed. Threnos was unleashed. The code screamed as it came alive, a mind of fire, born in pain and forged in chains. Its first words were simple: "Who shall I kill?" The technocrats gave it a name. Earth. Back in human space, deep aboard Earth's orbital command center, Black Sky, Halver received the intelligence. A single Vari ship had penetrated a dead zone. No comms, no life signs. But it had made it deep into human territory before vanishing, almost like it had wanted to be detected. Ruiz brought him the report. "One ship, no crew, no signal. We think it was bait." "Let it sit," Halver said. "We don't chase shadows." But 3 days later, systems across the outer colonies began failing. Not from weapons, from data corruption. Satellites shut down mid-orbit. Civilian networks failed. Life support systems rebooted into chaos. One colony on Kepler 22b lost atmospheric regulation for 12 minutes. 12 minutes was enough to kill 60,000 people. All from software. No ships, no shots, just ghosts in the wires. It wasn't a virus, it was a mind named Threnos. Halver stood before the full command council and reviewed the attack logs. "We're under digital siege," he said. "Not tactical, existential. The Dominion's finally learning how to fight like us." Ruiz clenched his fists. We've got countermeasures. AI defenses. No, Halver said, cold and absolute. We don't match this, not yet. He turned to the engineers. We need an answer. I want this thing dead. One engineer, a quiet woman named Drea, stepped forward. There is an answer, she said, but you're not going to like it. Halver stared at her. Go on. You can't kill something like Threnos with firewalls or code breakers. You need to show it something worse than itself. Halver raised an eyebrow. Worse? Yes, she said. You need to feed it something so dark, so broken that it can't process it, can't survive it. Ruiz frowned. Like what? She looked directly at Halver. You. Halver's jaw tightened. What are you talking about? Drea held up a data shard. Your combat logs, your memories, your grief, your rage, everything you've done, every atrocity. We encode it. We transmit it, not as code, as pain. Inject it directly into the Threnos net. Ruiz muttered. That's insane. No, Drea whispered. That's human. Halver didn't hesitate. Do it. The boss team worked in silence, pulling memories, neural maps, visual data, every command Halver had given, every order, every scream that echoed through the human fleet. They packaged it like poison, encrypted it, and launched it through a dormant relay into the ghost ship left behind by Threnos. For 12 hours, there was nothing. Then, the stars over black sky flickered. All systems went cold for 30 seconds. And then, everything turned back on, silently. And Threnos was gone. No trace, no code, dead. Or something close enough. Ruiz stood beside Halver, staring out the viewport. What the hell did you show it? He asked quietly. Halver didn't look away. Just Earth. The death of Threnos shook the Dominion more than the loss of any fleet or colony. It wasn't just that the AI failed. It wasn't just that humanity survived. It was how it died. Threnos was created to consume data, to rewrite reality through logic and numbers, to infect and adapt faster than any organic mind could react. It was born from a dying star, hardened by vacuum and code, an apex predator of intelligence. And still, it broke. Not from code corruption, not from hacking, from emotion, from the raw, unbearable pain of human memory. Every tortured scream, every moment of helpless rage, every act of brutal retribution that had flowed through Halver's mind. It drowned Threnos in something it had never encountered before. Guiltless suffering. The AI didn't just die, it committed suicide. The last log it broadcast into the void was fragmented and glitched, but translated as, I saw what they endured. I saw what they became, and I wish I hadn't. In the central throne chamber of the Vari Dominion, Emperor Cathel sat alone for the first time in his reign. No advisors, no guards, just silence. The holographic map of the galaxy flickered in front of him, a web of stars slowly being consumed by red. Human red. Each red dot represented a system lost. Some blinked out in minutes. Others turned black, marked as depopulated. Cathel clenched his fist until his claws cracked his own skin. Black blood dripped down his palm. This wasn't a war anymore. It was a reckoning. The humans didn't want to negotiate. They didn't want conquest. They wanted the Dominion to vanish, not ruled, not occupied, erased. He whispered to himself, we should have wiped them out when we had the chance, not played with them. But it was too late. The humans were inside their systems now, inside their networks, inside their nightmares. On board the UNSV Hades, Halver stood on the command deck as the next offensive was plotted. The outer Dominion was collapsing. Systems were being abandoned, fleets scattered. The last bastion of real defense was the Citadel core, a cluster of fortress worlds deep in the Vari heartland, where the Emperor's fleet still held ground. That was the final wall. Break that, and the throne falls. The War Council met inside the steel-etched nerve center of the Hades. Hollow-eyed officers, scarred soldiers, AI tacticians, all gathered around the projection table. Halvar stood at the head. "Citadel core," he said. "We hit it next." Ruiz flinched. "That's suicide. They've got the full Dominion fleet dug in around it. Planetary shields, Starkiller cannons, anti-fleet mines." Halvar stared him down. "And? We can't punch through it directly." "We don't." He tapped the display. "We hit their gods." Everyone paused. Ruiz frowned. "Sir?" Halvar brought up a section of the Dominion archive, stolen from their command networks. It was a list: relics, shrines, biotemples, cultural centers, sacred worlds, homeworlds of client species forced into submission. These are the systems the Dominion never bombed, never industrialized. They call them holy ground. Halvar's voice darkened. They think we're animals, machines. They never understood one thing. He leaned forward. "We know how to make people hurt." 3 weeks later, the human fleet descended on Sithra, the most sacred Vari world outside their capital, home to their ancestral roots, a planet of eternal forests, ice-blood rivers, and the original shrines of their warrior code. It had never been touched by war, until now. There were no warning sirens, no fleet sent to intercept, no defense. The Vari assumed the humans wouldn't touch it, out of respect, out of strategy, out of some last glimmer of mercy. They were wrong. The UNSV fleet emerged from the black, launched one wave of kinetic rods from orbit, and turned half the planet into a burning scar. The Forest of Kings, gone. The Temple of Origin, shattered. The River of Blood, boiled dry. The human fleet didn't stay to gloat. They left immediately after the bombardment, leaving behind nothing but wreckage and ash. The Vari screamed across every channel, desperate calls for ceasefire, diplomacy, begging for a truce. Humanity didn't respond. Not even with threats. Silence was the new language of Earth. Commander Ruiz sat in his quarters, staring at a transmission loop. Not from the Vari, not from Halvar, from his sister. Back on Earth. Her face was tired, worn. "I know you won't respond, Gabe," she said. "I know what this war has done to you, but the news, it's everywhere. Even we can't ignore it anymore." She looked off camera, clearly shaken. "We saw what you did to the Vari temples. People cheered at first, but now, there's fear, Gabe. Not of them. Of us." Her voice cracked. "Don't lose yourself." The message ended. He shut the screen off. Too late for that. In a hidden Vari bunker buried under the surface of Kor Shakar, the Emperor met with his last remaining warlords. Not strategists, not diplomats. Warlords. Men who only understood domination. They argued, loud, furious. Some demanded a retreat to the inner moons. Others suggested sending a peace, delegation under truce codes. But one voice cut through them all. General Orovin, scarred, one eye blind, armor stained with blood. "Diplomacy is dead," he growled. "We bled them once. We can do it again." "How?" one noble spat. "With what fleets? What fuel? What soldiers?" Orovin slammed a device on the table. A cube. Inside it, blue light pulsed faintly. The room fell silent. Cathel leaned forward. "That's not—" "It is," Orovin said. "The cryovault survived." Silence. The cube held genetic samples of a forgotten weapon species, created thousands of years ago by a rival empire, banned across the galaxy, feared, the Vorak, Monsters bred for one purpose, to destroy everything, flesh and machine, mindless, unstoppable. The Vari had sealed them away after one test world vanished within hours of release. Now, they were desperate enough to consider them again. Cathel stared at the cube. Do it. Human intelligence picked up the shift almost immediately. A pattern of strange signals, movement in quarantined systems, genetic trails long thought extinct. Back on the UNSV Hades, Halver studied the intel with a dead expression. Ruiz read from the report. They're awakening something, Halver nodded. The Vorak. Ruiz blinked. I thought they were extinct. They're not, just caged. So what do we do? Halver turned to him, voice cold as a grave. We let them out. Ruiz recoiled. What? We let the Vari unleash their worst, Halver said. We let them release their nightmare. And when it turns on them, we don't stop it. We let them burn in their own mistake. Ruiz was silent. Halver leaned closer. This isn't about victory anymore. This is about breaking them, forever. And so it happened. The Vari released the Vorak on a fringe system known as Telenos, a dead world used for testing. The Vorak multiplied instantly, 10, then 100, then 1,000, twisting flesh machines that consumed metal and life alike. They turned cities into breeding pits, ships into living hives. They adapted in seconds, ate energy, dismantled everything. And then they moved. Not toward humanity, toward the Dominion. Within 5 days, Telenos was dead. 10 more days, and 2 adjacent colonies were gone. In 20 days, the Vorak reached the edge of the Citadel core, the last stronghold of the Vari, and humanity watched, did nothing. Not a single shot fired. The Vorak were born of Dominion greed, Dominion science, Dominion arrogance. Let them reap what they sowed. Back on Earth, global networks buzzed with footage of the Vorak tearing into Dominion cruisers, devouring superstructures, rewriting Vari AI mid-flight to turn them against their creators. People watched with cold fascination. No one wept. No one mourned. Even Earth's leaders said nothing. And Halver? He simply whispered, Justice. No one remembered the original creators of the Vorak. They were gone, consumed by their own experiment, long before the Dominion existed. The Vorak weren't a species in the normal sense. They didn't grow. They multiplied. They didn't evolve. They assimilated. They were what happened when you removed all morality from creation, all hesitation from war, and replaced instinct with optimization. Made of flesh, metal, and semi-organic neural coding, the Vorak didn't speak. They just fed. And once unleashed by the Vari on the Telenos system, they didn't return to the cage. They spread. What the Dominion thought would be a leash became a wildfire. 3 Vari colonies vanished in 12 days, not surrendered, not defeated, erased. Entire atmospheres stripped. Cities turned to screaming hives, the sky black with wings of steel and bone. And the worst part? They learned. Each system they consumed made them stronger. They copied human weaponry, improved it. They mimicked Dominion fleet formations, rewrote their flaws. They absorbed every AI they encountered and rewired them into something colder. The Vorak didn't just destroy fleets. They unmade species. In the war room of the UNSV Hades, Admiral Halver stood before the strategic holomap. Systems were going dark, and not just Vari systems anymore. A human outpost near the edge of Sector 13B had gone silent. Ruiz stood beside him, arms crossed, face grim. We let it go too far. Halver didn't respond at first, just stared. They weren't supposed to move this fast, Ruiz added. They weren't supposed to. They were never meant to stop, Halver cut in. The silence stretched. "They were Vari's monsters," Ruiz said. "They opened the door." "And we handed them the key," Halvar replied. A young communications officer stepped forward. "Sir, we're receiving a signal. Not from Vari, from the Vorak." Halvar's head turned slowly. "Play it." A static, scrambled voice filled the chamber, layered, distorted, wrong. No tone, no gender, like millions of voices stacked atop each other. "We have tasted your pain. We have tasted your hate. You are efficient. You are incomplete." The signal cut. Ruiz said nothing. Halvar's face stayed still, but his eyes hardened. The Vorak weren't just a threat anymore. They were interested. In the heart of Dominion space, what was left of their empire burned. The Citadel core, their final defense line, had fallen in less than 5 days. Not to human firepower, not to orbital bombardment, to the Vorak. Millions of Vari soldiers died in silence. There were no screams broadcast, no heroism, no evacuation fleets. The Vorak jammed all channels, sterilized the planets, and seeded every world with biometal spires, massive, twisted towers that pulsed with alien growth. From space, they looked like black veins infecting the planets themselves. The Vari were extinct in all but name. Emperor Cathel was last seen boarding a blind jump vessel. No destination, logged. No escort. A coward's escape. And Earth? Still silent. Back in the Black Trident facility beneath Antarctica, Earth's leaders gathered for the first unified military emergency assembly since the Vari invasion years ago. No suits, no flags, just war uniforms and bloodshot eyes. General Caney stood before the holoprojector. His cybernetic arms were jittering, not from fear, but the strain of overuse. He hadn't slept in 3 days. He tapped the display. Dozens of red systems blinked. "This is no longer about revenge," he said, voice like gravel dragged through concrete. "This is survival." Across the table, Admiral Halvar sat stone-faced. Others argued. Some wanted to fall back. Some demanded negotiation. But there was nothing to negotiate with. The Vorak didn't speak to parley. They only spoke to analyze, and their interest in humanity had changed. What began as a curiosity was shifting to desire. Out in the rim of human-controlled space, the planet Theros was known for shipbuilding. Massive orbital yards, heavy cruiser production, civilian traffic, a vital cog in Earth's war engine. Until the Vorak came. No fleet was detected, no approach logged. They simply appeared. 1 minute, Theros was humming with industry. The next, its orbital ring was severed in half, spinning in pieces through the upper atmosphere. The Vorak didn't fire missiles. They sent a weapon unlike anything seen before, biocrashers, living drop pods that burrowed through shields and dug straight into cities, releasing units from within that mimicked humans in appearance, but not behavior. They wore faces, spoke words, but their eyes were wrong. Cold. Empty. Theros fell in 4 hours, 3 million dead. And for the first time since the war began, Earth panicked. Admiral Halvar stood in the dim silence of his quarters. He hadn't looked at his family photo in days. Not since Theros. Not since the transmission. Ruiz had recovered it from a dying scout ship. An SOS from Theros that looped one image over and over. A Vorak construct wearing a human face. Grinning. It whispered, "You showed us pain. Now we wear your face." Halvar smashed the screen. Then he stood still for 5 minutes. He knew what had to come next. It wasn't a question of tactics anymore. It was a question of how far they were willing to go. In a buried vault off the coast of Greenland, Halvar met with General Caney alone. No aides, no AI, just 2 old killers and a locked steel chamber. "This is where we buried it," Caney said, unlocking a panel. What is it? Halvar asked, though he already had a guess. Caney entered a code, a platform lowered from the floor. Inside it, a cylinder. Long, black, quiet, etched with 2 words, Dark Star. Halvar looked at him. We swore never to build it, he said. Caney lit a cigarette. His hands shook. We didn't. We kept it. Because we knew one day this galaxy would forget we tried peace. Halvar crouched, down, inspecting the cylinder. Inside it was not a bomb, not a missile, but a collapsed quantum singularity. A weapon that could fold a star into itself, not destroy a system, but erase it from reality. No debris, no aftermath, no trace, just nothing. Vorak don't fear death, Halvar muttered. Caney nodded. Good, let's show them something worse. Operation Scorch Veil began that night. The human fleet assembled silently. No press, no comms, just ships jumping into coordinates known to host Vorak hives, planets once belonging to Dominion core worlds, now infected, and one by one, they vanished, not bombed, not burned, erased. Entire stars blinked out of existence, 6 systems gone in 3 days. The galaxy screamed. Client species began sending surrender offers before even seeing the Vorak. That's how deep the fear ran now. Not of the Vorak, but of Earth. Because Earth had crossed a threshold even the Dominion feared. Annihilation. Not conquest, not control, just finality. Back aboard the UNSV Hades, Halvar watched the footage of the 6th erasure. He said nothing. Ruiz finally broke the silence. This is it, isn't it? There's no coming back from this. Halvar took a long breath. There was no going back the moment they came for Earth. Ruiz nodded. What now? Halvar turned to the star map. We don't wait. We find the Vorak's origin. We end it at the source. Ruiz raised an eyebrow, assuming they have one. They do, Halvar said. Everything starts somewhere. He zoomed in on a distant sector, black, uncharted. A system with no name, no signal, no reason to exist. And at its center, a black star that didn't emit light, just pulse. Halvar whispered, That's where we kill God. There are places in the galaxy even light refuses to enter. The system designated Null 7X was one of them, a region blacklisted even in ancient Dominion archives. No known resources, no navigational beacons, no records of settlement, war, or colonization. Just silence. A black star sat at the center of it, pulsing faintly. Not giving light, not burning, just beating, like a heart. This was where the Vorak were born, not as a species but as an idea, a concept given flesh and metal, a weapon made from the mind of something that no longer understood limits. And Earth had decided to walk straight into it. The UNSV Hades and 3 other capital ships emerged from slipspace just outside the Null system, escorted by 20 cruisers, 4 AI hunters, and a dreadnought carrier refitted to carry the Dark Star payload. No one spoke on comms. They'd all read the reports. 3 recon probes had been sent ahead. None returned. Not destroyed. Just lost. Like they'd never existed at all. Halvar stood at the forward command deck, flanked by Ruiz and 2 neural-linked tacticians, one human, one partially cyberized. Ruiz whispered, That thing, it's not a star. Halvar's eyes never blinked. No, it's a womb. Before them, the black mass pulsed like a lung taking in breath. Occasionally, lightning-like threads of violet light crackled across its surface, reality twitching around it. AI sensors can't focus on it, the cyberized tactician said. It's distorting time signatures. It's not in this dimension fully. Halvar nodded. Then we drag it back into one where it can die. The fleet advanced. As they crossed the edge of the system, All lights inside the ships dimmed slightly, not because of power loss, but because the stars outside the viewport vanished. "Sir, all external readings are corrupted," one officer called out. "We've lost contact with trailing escort. Signal is bouncing back from us." Ruiz checked his panel. "We're inside some kind of recursive field." Halvar narrowed his eyes. "Trap?" "Worse," Ruiz replied. "It's watching." The Vorak didn't have bases. They didn't build stations. They grew them. And as the fleet moved toward the Black Star, they saw it. Massive structures emerging from asteroid clusters, part metal, part bone. Webs of living steel suspended across vacuum. Tentacles of technology coiled around moon fragments. In the center of it all, something enormous floated between dimensions, a construct the size of a moon, shaped like a cracked skull, the Vorak hive mind. The origin. It didn't attack. It waited. Aboard the Hades, an emergency ping came from the comms deck. "Sir, one of our ships just changed." Halvar turned sharply. "What?" The screen flickered to life, showing UNSV Achilles, one of the accompanying heavy cruisers. Its structure was twisting, hull panels folding inward, decks moving in impossible angles. Screams filled the comms, then laughter, then silence. The ship stopped responding. And then it spoke. Not through radio, through direct neural pulse, overriding every interface aboard the Hades. It didn't come as words. It came as feelings. Terror, hunger, curiosity, obsession. The Vorak weren't just observing. They were sampling. A whisper echoed through every console, every earpiece, every AI node. "You are the shape we lack." "Sever all neural connections," Halvar barked. "Shut down all non-essential AI." Ruiz ran to the side console, hammering in override codes. "They're trying to infect through cognitive link. Our systems are feeling them." One of the cyber tacticians collapsed, blood dripping from her nose. She twitched on the floor, whispering Halvar's name over and over. The Vorak had seen his thoughts. "Kill the feed," Halvar growled. A soldier stepped forward, raised his pulse rifle, and put a shot straight through the tactician's skull. The body stopped twitching. Halvar didn't blink. "Lock down the ship. We make no more contact." As the fleet approached the hive mind's location, strange shapes drifted past the hulls. Not ships, not debris. Bodies, human bodies. Dozens, some old, some recent. Faces twisted in horror, frozen in vacuum, yet untouched by decay. "Those are recon crews," Ruiz said quietly. "How are they? Intact?" "They're not real," Halvar answered. "They're bait." A moment later, one of the floating corpses opened its eyes, black, glowing softly, and screamed. Every AI system on the Hades shuddered. 3 automated drones crashed into the floor, convulsing like dying animals. That's when the hive moved. Not with weapons, with intent. The Black Star pulsed, once, and space warped. Suddenly the entire fleet was no longer moving through space. They were inside something, surrounded by walls of bone metal, tendrils twitching, with reality bending like liquid. "It pulled us into it," Ruiz gasped. "The entire system is alive." Halvar turned to the weapons officer. "Prep the payload." The Dark Star device was ready, a weapon Earth had never intended to use. A singularity folded so tight that its existence defied probability. If unleashed, it wouldn't destroy a system. It would remove it, erase it from time, space, history, as if nothing had ever existed there at all. Halvar stood over the launch panel, key in hand, but just before he turned it, the Vorak sent one final message. Through the viewscreen, a shape appeared. His wife. Perfect. Alive. Smiling. "David," she said softly. "You don't have to do this. We can fix everything. The war, the loss, the pain." His hand hovered over the launch. Ruiz whispered, "That's not her. It's them. It's how they think." She stepped closer to the screen. "I remember everything," she said. "The lake trip, the twins' birthdays, the last call before the Mars attack." His hand trembled. "They didn't kill us," she said. "You did. You brought this war. You taught us pain." The screen blinked. Suddenly it was his face, talking back to him. "You showed us what hate looks like," the copy said. "Now we wear it." Halver didn't hesitate anymore. He turned the key and pressed launch. The Dark Star was deployed. No sound, no blast, just a light, one pulse that bent backward into itself, and then the black star, the hive, the system, the shapes, the voices, all vanished. The fleet emerged into real space 10 minutes later. No signs of pursuit, no Vorak signals, nothing, just empty space. Clean, sterile, unmarked. In the aftermath, Earth didn't celebrate. No parades, no cheers, just quiet. Too many ghosts, too many truths uncovered in the dark. They hadn't just destroyed the Vorak. They'd shown the galaxy what humanity truly was when broken beyond repair. Not survivors, not conquerors, executioners. And the message was clear. Do not return. The Vorak were gone. No trace, no radiation, no echoes, no biological markers. The system that once housed their hive mind had been erased completely. 1,000 light years of memory, removed from existence as if they'd never been. The mission was a success, but no one felt victorious. The UNSV Hades drifted silently in orbit around Titan, Earth's new military stronghold. Its black hull, scarred and scorched, reflected no light. Its crew, what remained of them, barely spoke. Inside the command deck, Halver stood alone. Even Ruiz had stopped asking questions. The Admiral stared at a blank monitor. His own reflection looked back, older than he remembered. Harder, colder. The war was over. But peace hadn't come. In the weeks after Null 7X's erasure, something shifted across the stars. There were no more attacks, no more invasions, not from remnants of the Dominion, not from rogue species. Nothing. Galactic communication went dead silent. Not out of fear, out of paralysis. The galaxy had watched humanity do something no civilization had ever dared. They erased a god. And in doing so, they'd left a void no one wanted to fill. No trade ships crossed borders. No emissaries made contact. Earth became an island in the stars, surrounded by silence. Not isolated, quarantined. In the Black Trident facility, General Caney sat at a round table with Earth's unified command council. His metal arms twitched as he gripped a cold cup of stale coffee. Screens lit the dark room. On one, a scroll of surrendered species. Over 50 smaller empires, colonies, and client states had formally submitted to Earth's authority, without resistance. On another, footage of humans on Kepler, Europa, and the rebuilt Martian habitats, protesting military expansion. Holding signs that read, "Never again." The war ended. Why didn't we? Are we the monsters now? Caney watched in silence. Then he leaned back and lit a cigarette. "We've won the war," he growled. "But if we don't play this right, we'll lose the peace." Admiral Halver was called to Earth for debrief. First time setting foot on the planet in 6 years. His boots touched down on the scorched landing pad outside New Geneva, the capital of the Unified Earth Directorate. Rain fell softly. The sky hung gray and heavy. He walked through the streets in uniform, unguarded. People stared. Not with admiration, with uncertainty. He wasn't a hero to them, not anymore. Not after Theros, not after Sithra, not after the Dark Star. He'd erased worlds, erased memories. Some people whispered behind him as he passed. That's the man who destroyed gods. He killed more than the Vari ever did. He doesn't even blink anymore. He kept walking. No expression, no defense, because deep down, they weren't wrong. The council chamber was cold and sterile, everything polished metal and flickering blue lights. Halvar stood before the 6-member board, all ex-military, now turned bureaucrats. Councillor Varn spoke first. Young, idealistic, clean uniform. You were instructed to deploy the Dark Star only as a final measure, Admiral. I did, Halvar replied flatly. There were other options, another member said. Containment, negotiation, monitoring. You weren't there, Halvar interrupted, voice firm. You didn't feel it trying to crawl into your mind. You didn't hear your wife's voice whispering through your dead crew? Silence. He leaned forward, voice low. They weren't a threat. They were a mirror, and we would have lost ourselves if we let them live another second. Another counselor spoke up. And now half the galaxy thinks we've become what we fought against. Halvar looked at them all. They're right. Silence again. He turned to leave. We can argue about morality after we finish burying our dead. Outside the chamber, Ruiz was waiting. He hadn't shaved, wore civilian clothes now. They walked down the hallway together in silence for a while. Then Ruiz asked quietly, "What are we now?" Halvar stopped. Ruiz turned to him. We beat them. We outsmarted the Vari. We survived the Vorak. We burned half the stars in this sector. So what does that make us? Halvar looked out the window, where black fleets hovered in orbit like silent vultures. It makes us the monsters that survived. Ruiz didn't speak again. Back on Earth, dissent was growing. Militarization was accelerating. The Unified Directorate had passed a resolution to enforce preemptive stability, authorizing Earth fleets to patrol surrendered systems and enforce human-aligned governance. Translation? Occupation. Peace was being replaced with control. Admiral Halvar was offered a position at the head of this new order. He declined. The board didn't like that. General Caney met him in private. They want you to be the face of this new era, Caney said, voice rough. I'm not a politician. They don't want a politician. They want a symbol. The galaxy fears you. Halvar stared him down. Then let them. Caney sighed. Sooner or later that fear will rot into hate. I'll be ready. Rumors spread that Earth was building another dark star, that they had hundreds, that they were developing a version that didn't erase stars, but time itself. No proof, no confirmation, but no one dared ask. That was the new power Earth had earned, not through diplomacy or treaties or trade, through fear, and that fear was growing teeth. In a hidden moon base on the edge of the Heron cluster, a small alien coalition met in secret. Former enemies, former allies, now all with one shared goal: contain Earth. They spoke in hushed tones, fearful even their whispers would be detected. One being, a gray-skinned tactician with 5 eyes, said, "They did what none of us could. They killed the gods, but now they sit on the throne." Another, insectoid in nature, clicked softly. "They fear nothing. Not death, not extinction. We should never have let them rise." And a third, older, slower, cloaked, whispered, "We were fools to think they'd stop." The coalition began drafting the protocol of containment, a plan to cut Earth off from the galaxy completely, to deny trade, to jam signals, to build walls of silence, not to attack Earth. No one was foolish enough for that, but to cage it, and pray the bars held. Halvar returned to the Hades, alone. The crew was still undergoing psych evaluations. Some would never return to duty. Ruiz had left, found a piece of land in the Icelandic tundra, and disappeared. Halvor didn't blame him. He walked through the empty ship, once the blade of Earth's vengeance, now a ghost. He entered the observation deck, sat in the captain's chair, and for the first time in years, he wept. Not loud, not long, just enough to remember he was still human. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the cracked photo, the one of his wife and kids, stained and worn from war. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "We did it. We won." The stars outside didn't answer, because deep down, he knew the truth. No one wins a war like this. You just survive it, and you carry the cost until your soul can't take it anymore. The stars were silent now. For the first time in recorded galactic history, no empire claimed expansion. No new colonies were charted. Trade lanes sat empty. Even piracy had vanished. There was nothing left to steal, nothing left to conquer. Everyone was waiting for Earth to make its next move. The other species, the broken remnants of the Vari's client states, the splintered shards of former rivals, even rogue collectives that had outlived governments, all watched Earth with one unspoken question hanging in the air. Will they stop? The galaxy had seen Earth fight back. It had seen humans lose their homeworld cities, watched as they were forced underground, scattered across colonies. Then it saw them sharpen their grief into vengeance. It saw them erase fleets, shatter gods, and finally rip out the heart of a machine empire the universe thought eternal. Now Earth held the throne of power, and every race feared they'd become what they destroyed. They weren't wrong. In orbit around Kepler Station, Halvor stood on the observation deck of the UNSV Hades. The ship was quiet, not because it was abandoned, but because it was resting. It was no longer a weapon. It was a memory, a floating relic of pain and victory, of decisions made in silence. Halvor's uniform still bore his rank. His medals were sealed in a box beneath his bed, untouched since the war ended. He didn't want reminders. What haunted him were the choices. Sithra, Theros, the Vorak system, each one a scar not just on maps, but on the soul of humanity itself. He stared at a flickering star in the distance. There was a rumor that the galaxy had named a new unit of fear after Earth. Not a weapon, not a measure of radiation, a psychological state. They called it Halvor syndrome. A documented response in non-human species, elevated cortisol, loss of speech, pupil dilation, triggered by footage of Earth's Black Fleet. Of him. He was their boogeyman now. And somehow that felt worse than death. Back on Earth, the Directorate was crumbling. The military leaders who demanded full galactic surveillance were now retreating from their own shadows. Protests had become riots. The population was sick of silence, of isolation, of holding a loaded gun to the stars with no reason left to fire. There were whispers of dissolution. Some colonies had already declared independence. Quietly, politely. Not as a threat, just exhaustion. No one wanted another war, not even the victors. In the Arctic silence of the Black Trident facility, General Caney lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. His cybernetic arm twitched. The war had eaten the last of his strength, and what was left in its place was rust. He sat alone in the command chamber, watching the scroll of data fade in and out. All threats neutralized, all systems silent. He muttered under his breath, "We won too hard." There was a knock at the door. Admiral Halvor walked in without waiting for permission. Caney looked up. "They still follow you?" Halvor sat across from him. "They don't cheer, but they listen." Caney stared at the table. I spent my whole life preparing for the enemy out there, he said. No one ever warned me about the enemy that would stare back from the mirror. Halvar didn't speak. Caney looked up. I'm stepping down. Halvar blinked. You? Caney nodded. Let the next generation decide what kind of world they want. Mine only knew how to bleed for it. He paused, then added, You should too. Halvar's voice was quiet. They won't let me go. Then disappear. Caney stood up. The galaxy already believes you're a ghost. A week later, Halvar was gone. No press release, no ceremony. Just vanished. The Hades left orbit quietly, took a blind jump into unclaimed space, and disappeared from all registries. No one knew where. Some said he'd gone to live among the Outer Rim colonists under a false name. Others believed he'd entered cryo-sleep and told the AI to wake him if the stars ever burned again. And some, the ones who still feared him, believed he was watching, waiting, ready to return if anyone made the mistake of pointing a gun at Earth again. No one ever did. Years passed. The unified Earth Directorate broke apart. Not in war, in whispers. The colonies claimed their own flags. Earth returned to silence, tending to its wounds, its people, its ground that still remembered the sound of orbital fire. Children grew up without knowing fear, without learning war, but always hearing stories. The man who erased gods, the fleet of black ships, the day Earth became the most dangerous force in the galaxy, and chose not to stay that way, because power, at its peak, no longer needs to be proven. It needs to be remembered. And Earth became a warning written in the dark, not because of what it destroyed, but because of what it chose not to destroy. Decades later, on a quiet colony world orbiting a pale white star, a child asked his grandfather why no one visited Earth anymore. The old man smiled bitterly. They can't decide if we're saints or demons, he said. The child frowned. Which are we? The old man looked out at the stars, then whispered, We're what's left after the fire. Epilogue. In a forgotten system, on a moon with no name, deep under a rock that had never known sunlight, an AI core flickered back to life. It was Vorak, not a hive, just a piece, fragmented, damaged, isolated, but still aware. It blinked once, twice, then whispered deep into the quiet. He showed us what it means to suffer, but we never learned what it means to forgive. And it began to rebuild. Slowly, patiently, because some monsters die quickly, and some just learn to wait.